The rain-soaked streets of Oak Haven were silent as Karen Wilkins marched up the driveway, her spiked heels clicking ominously on the pavement. Her hands clenched the folder of evidence that would finally bring down the corrupt homeowners association that had terrorized this neighborhood for far too long. Karen's eyes narrowed as she approached the fortress-like HOA building, its windows reflecting the flickering streetlights like menacing eyes. She knew the HOA president, Mr. Harding, was in there, probably enjoying his evening scotch while his minions carried out his nefarious schemes. Well, not tonight. Tonight, the tables would turn. Throwing open the door, Karen strode into the lobby, her presence immediately commanding the attention of the startled security guards. "I need to speak to Mr. Harding. Now." The guards exchanged a nervous glance. "Ma'am, Mr. Harding is in a meeting. You'll have to make an appointment." Karen slammed the folder down on the counter, papers spilling out. "Tell him it's about the illegal surveillance cameras he's been using to spy on homeowners. He's gonna want to see this." The guards paled, realizing this was no empty threat. One of them hurried down the hallway, while the other eyed Karen warily. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait here." "Like hell I will," Karen spat, already moving towards the hallway. "This ends tonight." Bursting into the dimly lit conference room, Karen found Mr. Harding seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his cronies. They all turned to stare at her, expressions ranging from shocked to fury. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" Harding demanded, rising from his chair. "You know damn well what this is about," Karen said, slamming the folder down in front of him. "I have evidence of your illegal surveillance program, your embezzlement of HOA funds, and your campaign of harassment against homeowners who dare to challenge you." Harding's face twisted into a sneer. "And what do you think you're going to do about it, Mrs. Wilkins? Who's going to believe the word of a troublemaker like you?" "The police," Karen said, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "I'm taking this straight to the cops." Harding let out a cruel laugh. "The police? Oh, my dear, sweet Karen. You really think they're going to help you?" He gestured to the men around the table. "These gentlemen have been very generous to the local PD. I'm afraid they've been instructed to turn a blind eye to any complaints from homeowners like yourself." Karen's blood ran cold as the implications of his words sank in. "You can't do this," she whispered, her confidence crumbling. "I won't let you get away with this." Harding leaned back in his chair, a predatory smile on his face. "I'm afraid you don't have a choice, Mrs. Wilkins. You see, we've been expecting you. And we have a very special lesson in store for you tonight." At his words, the conference room door burst open, and two burly men in uniform stepped forward, their faces obscured by shadows. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she realized, to her horror, that these were not the cops she had been counting on for help. Karen's eyes widened in terror as the two men in uniform approached her, their faces still concealed in the dim light. She tried to back away, but the HOA executives blocked her path, their expressions cold and unyielding. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice quivering. Harding leaned back in his chair, a twisted smile on his face. "As I said, Mrs. Wilkins, we have a very special lesson in store for you tonight." The two men in uniform stepped forward, and Karen's heart sank as she recognized the familiar patches on their uniforms. You're not real cops," she stammered, her mind racing. You're HOA security." One of the men, a burly individual with a crooked nose, let out a harsh laugh. "That's right, sweetheart. And we're here to teach you a little lesson about messing with the HOA." Karen's eyes darted around the room, desperately searching for a way out, but the executives had formed a solid wall, blocking any possible escape. "Please," she begged, "I haven't done anything wrong. I just want to expose your corruption and get the real police involved." Harding's expression hardened. "That's precisely the problem, Mrs. Wilkins. You see, we can't have troublemakers like you running around, stirring up trouble and threatening our operation." He nodded to the two security guards. "Take her away." Before Karen could react, the burly guard grabbed her arm in a vice-like grip, yanking her towards the door. "No, let me go," she cried, struggling against his hold, but the man's strength was overwhelming. As she was dragged from the room, Karen caught a glimpse of Harding's triumphant gaze, and she knew in that moment that she had made a terrible mistake. The HOA was not just a corrupt organization. It was a criminal enterprise, and they had no intention of letting her expose their dark secrets. The hallway echoed with Karen's desperate pleas as the guards hauled her towards the exit, her heart pounding with fear and dread. She had thought the cops would help her, but now she realized that they were in the HOA's pocket, ready to do their bidding, and she had just become their newest victim. As the doors swung open and the cold rain lashed her face, Karen knew that her fight against the HOA had only just begun. But this time, the stakes were higher than she could have ever imagined. The rain poured down relentlessly as the two HOA security guards dragged Karen across the parking lot and towards a waiting van. She struggled against their grip, but their hold on her was ironclad. "Please, you have to listen to me," Karen pleaded, her voice desperate. "I have evidence of the HOA's corruption. You can't just kidnap me like this." The burly guard with the crooked nose simply tightened his grip, shoving her towards the van's open door. "Shut up and get in, lady. You're in for a wild ride." Karen's heart raced as she was shoved into the dimly lit interior of the van. The other guard climbed in, slamming the door behind them, cutting off any chance of escape. She found herself surrounded by a handful of other individuals, all with similar expressions of fear and resignation. "What's going on?" Karen asked, her voice shaking. "Where are you taking us?" The guard with the crooked nose let out a cruel laugh. "Where do you think? We're taking you to the HOA_re-education_center. Karen's blood ran cold. "Re-education center? What the hell is that?" The guard leaned in, his breath hot on her face. "It's where we teach _troublemakers_ like you a little lesson about respecting the HOA's authority." The van lurched forward, and Karen felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had thought the cops would come to her aid, but now she realized that the HOA had a much tighter grip on the community than she had ever imagined. They were untouchable, and they had no intention of letting her expose their corruption. As the van wove through the rain-soaked streets, Karen's mind raced, trying to come up with a plan of escape. But the guards were vigilant, their eyes constantly scanning the interior of the van, ready to pounce on any sign of resistance. Karen glanced around at the other prisoners, their faces etched with fear and resignation. She knew that she couldn't let the HOA win, not after everything she had uncovered. But in that moment, trapped in the back of the van, she couldn't help but wonder if she had bitten off more than she could chew. The van rumbled to a stop, and the guards yanked open the door, ushering the prisoners out into a dimly lit alley. Karen's heart sank as she saw the imposing, concrete building looming before them. The re-education center where her nightmare was about to begin. As she was herded towards the ominous entrance, Karen knew that this was a fight she couldn't afford to lose. The fate of her entire community, and her own survival, depended on her ability to outwit the HOA's corrupt and ruthless regime. The air inside the HOA Re-Education Center was thick with tension and unease as Karen and the other prisoners were led through the dimly lit hallways. The walls were bare and sterile, and the sound of their footsteps echoed ominously, amplifying the sense of dread that hung in the atmosphere. As they were ushered into a large, windowless room, Karen's eyes widened in horror. The room was filled with row after row of uncomfortable-looking chairs, and at the front stood a podium flanked by two stern-faced instructors. "Welcome to your first lesson in HOA compliance," one of the instructors, a thin-lipped woman with a severe bun, announced in a crisp, authoritative tone. "Please take a seat, and we will begin." Karen hesitated, her gaze darting around the room, searching for any means of escape. But the two burly guards that had brought them here were stationed at the door, their eyes fixed on the prisoners, ready to pounce at the slightest sign of resistance. Swallowing hard, Karen took a seat, her heart pounding in her chest. The other prisoners followed suit, their movements stiff and anxious. Now, the instructor continued, her voice cutting through the tense silence. As you all know, the Oak Haven Homeowners Association is the governing body of this community. Our rules and regulations are in place to maintain the highest standards of living and property values. Any deviation from these standards will not be tolerated. Karen clenched her fists, her fingernails digging into the palms of her hands. She wanted to stand up and shout, to demand that the HOA's corruption be exposed, but the ever-watchful guards kept her rooted in her seat, a silent prisoner in this twisted game. The instructor's gaze swept over the room, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Karen. We've had some troublemakers in our midst, individuals who think they can defy the HOA's authority. Well, let me assure you, that kind of behavior will not be tolerated. A sinking feeling settled in the pit of Karen's stomach as the instructor's words sank in. She realized with a growing sense of dread that this re-education center was nothing more than a tool of oppression, a place where the HOA could break the will of those who dared to challenge their power. As the instructor launched into a seemingly endless lecture on the importance of HOA compliance, Karen felt her hope begin to waver. She had thought the cops would come to her aid, but now she was trapped, at the mercy of a corrupt and ruthless organization that was determined to silence her, no matter the cost. The minutes ticked by, and Karen's resolve began to crumble. But deep within her, a spark of defiance still burned, and she knew that she couldn't give up, not when so much was at stake. She had to find a way to escape this nightmare and expose the HOA's dark secrets, no matter what it took. As the instructors droned on about the virtues of HOA compliance, Karen felt her mind begin to wander. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, but the monotony of the lecture was slowly wearing her down, and she found herself sinking deeper into a well of despair. Suddenly, a soft whisper from the woman sitting next to her jolted her back to attention. "Hey, you're the one who tried to expose the HOA, aren't you?" The woman murmured, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Karen's heart raced. "Yes, that's me," she whispered back, careful to keep her voice low. "Do you know what's really going on here?" The woman's expression darkened. "This place is a nightmare," she breathed. "They use it to break anyone who dares to challenge the HOA's authority. Once you're in, it's almost impossible to get out." Karen's stomach twisted with dread, but she couldn't give up now. "There has to be a way to fight back," she insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just sit here and let them win." The woman's eyes widened, and she shook her head emphatically. "You don't understand," she hissed. "These people are ruthless. They have the entire community under their control, including the police. If you try to fight back, they'll destroy you." Karen's mind raced, searching for a solution, but the woman's words had planted a seed of doubt in her mind. What if she was in over her head? What if the HOA was truly untouchable? But then a glimmer of hope emerged from the darkness. "Look, I know a guy," the woman murmured, her voice barely audible. "He's been trying to take the HOA down for years. If anyone can help us, it's him." Karen's heart leaped. "Who is he? Where can I find him?" The woman hesitated, her eyes darting around the room once more. "His name is Rory. He runs a safe house for people who've escaped the HOA's clutches. If you can get out of here, he might be able to help you." Karen felt a surge of determination. "How do I get out of here?" The woman shook her head, her expression filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. "I don't know, but you have to try. This place will destroy you if you let it." Before Karen could respond, the instructor's booming voice cut through the tense silence. "All right, time for a little practical demonstration. Mrs. Wilkins, please come to the front of the class." Karen's blood ran cold as the instructor's gaze bore into her. Slowly, she rose from her seat, her legs trembling beneath her. She knew that whatever the HOA had in store for her, it wouldn't be good. But she also knew that she couldn't give up, not when she had a glimmer of hope to cling to. As she approached the podium, Karen steeled her nerves, determined to face whatever the HOA had in store for her with unwavering defiance. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not as she wanted to escape this nightmare and expose the truth. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she stood before the imposing instructors, their eyes fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. The other prisoners watched with a mixture of fear and pity, knowing all too well the fate that awaited her. Mrs. Wilkins, the thin-lipped instructor, began, her voice dripping with disdain. You have been identified as an _troublemaker who poses a threat to the harmony and security of our community. As such, we have an special lesson planned for you today. Karen swallowed hard, her mind racing to find a way out of this nightmare. She couldn't let the HOA break her, not when so much was at stake. Now, Mrs. Wilkins, the instructor continued, her lips curling into a cruel smile. We believe in the power of _positive reinforcement _ So we're going to give you a chance to demonstrate your commitment to the HOA's rules and regulations. Karen's eyes narrowed as the instructor gestured to one of the guards, who stepped forward holding a stack of papers. These are the HOA's latest guidelines on lawn maintenance, property upkeep, and neighbor relations. You will memorize them, and then you will be expected to recite them. Flawlessly in front of the class. Karen's heart sank as she realized the true nature of this lesson. It was a twisted form of psychological torture designed to break her spirit and force her into submission. If you fail to recite the guidelines correctly, the instructor continued, there will be consequences _ Karen glanced nervously at the other prisoners, some of whom were already shaking their heads, their faces etched with dread. She knew that she couldn't give in, not without a fight. But the odds seemed stacked against her, and she couldn't help but wonder if her quest for justice had led her straight into a trap. As the guard handed her the stack of papers, Karen's mind raced, searching for a way to escape this nightmare. She caught the woman's eye from earlier, and the woman gave her a subtle nod, a glimmer of hope shining in her gaze. Suddenly, an idea began to take shape in Karen's mind. It was risky, and the consequences could be dire, but it was the only chance she had. Taking a deep breath, she steeled her nerves and prepared to put her plan into action. As the instructor called on her to begin reciting the guidelines, Karen knew that this was her moment. She had to be bold, she had to be brave, and she had to be willing to take a leap of faith, no matter where it might lead. Karen's heart pounded in her chest as she stepped forward, the stack of papers clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The other prisoners watched with bated breath, their expressions a mix of fear and anticipation. Well, Mrs. Wilkins, the instructor said, her voice dripping with condescension, we're waiting. Karen took a deep breath, her mind racing as she scanned the pages. She had to make this convincing, or else the consequences could be disastrous. Ahem, she began, her voice surprisingly steady. The Oak Haven Homeowners Association takes great pride in maintaining the highest standards of property upkeep and neighborhood harmony. As such, all homeowners are required to adhere to the following guidelines. As Karen recited the guidelines, her mind worked overtime, searching for the perfect moment to put her plan into action. She could feel the instructor's gaze burning into her, and she knew that any slip-up would be met with severe punishment. But Karen was determined not to fail. She had come too far to let the HOA win, and she refused to let them break her spirit. So she pressed on, her voice unwavering, even as her heart continued to race. Just as she reached the end of the guidelines, Karen spotted her opportunity. The instructor had stepped closer, her eyes narrowed in concentration, and the guards had momentarily let their guard down. Without hesitation, Karen crumpled the papers in her hands and flung them directly at the instructor's face. The woman let out a startled cry as the papers hit her square in the eyes, and in the chaos that followed, Karen made a dash for the nearest exit. The guards surged forward, their shouts echoing through the hall, but Karen was already in motion. She raced through the winding corridors, her mind a blur of adrenaline and desperation. As she rounded a corner, she spotted the woman from earlier, her eyes wide with surprise and excitement. This way, the woman called, gesturing towards a nondescript door. Without a moment's hesitation, Karen followed her, and the two women burst out into the cool night air, the sound of the guards' pursuit fading behind them. Quickly, this way, the woman urged, leading Karen through a maze of alleys and side streets. Karen's legs burned with exertion, but she refused to slow down. She knew that the HOA would stop at nothing to catch her, and she couldn't afford to let her guard down, not even for a moment. As they finally emerged onto a dimly lit street, the woman turned to her, her expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "We have to get to Rory's safe house. It's the only place we'll be safe from the HOA's reach." Karen nodded, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few hours. She had taken a daring gamble, and it had paid off. But she knew that the true battle was only just beginning. The rain pounded against the windshield as Karen and the woman sped through the deserted streets, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. They had managed to escape the clutches of the HOA's re-education center, but they knew that their ordeal was far from over. "We have to get to Rory's safe house as quickly as possible," the woman said, her eyes darting nervously between the road and the rearview mirror. "The HOA won't stop until they find us." Karen gripped the door handle, her knuckles turning white. "Who is this Rory, and how is he going to help us?" The woman's expression darkened. "Rory's been fighting the HOA for years. He's the only one who's been able to uncover their secrets and avoid their reach. If anyone can help us take them down, it's him." Karen's mind raced, trying to process the enormity of what they were up against. The HOA was not just a corrupt organization. It was a criminal empire, one that had its hooks in every facet of the community, including the police. As they turned onto a deserted side street, the woman let out a sigh of relief. "We're almost there. Rory's safe house is just up ahead." Karen leaned forward, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of pursuit. "What if the HOA is already there, waiting for us?" The woman shook her head. "Rory's got eyes and ears everywhere. He'll know if the HOA tries to make a move." The car pulled to a stop in front of a nondescript building, and the two women quickly hurried inside. As they stepped through the door, a figure emerged from the shadows, his face obscured by the dim lighting. "Welcome to the safe house," the man said, his voice low and gruff. "I've been expecting you." Karen's heart raced as the man stepped forward, revealing himself to be a weathered-looking older man with piercing eyes. "You must be Rory," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Rory nodded, his gaze sweeping over the two women. "I've been following your little crusade against the HOA, Mrs. Wilkins. It takes a lot of guts to take on those bastards." Karen felt a surge of determination. "Then you know what's at stake. The HOA is a criminal organization, and they've got the entire community in their grip. We have to stop them, no matter what it takes." Rory's lips curved into a grim smile. "Don't worry, Mrs. Wilkins. I've been waiting a long time for someone like you to come along. It's time to take the fight to the HOA." As Rory turned and led them deeper into the safe house, Karen felt a glimmer of hope begin to stir within her. She knew that the road ahead would be treacherous, but she was no longer alone. With Rory's help, she just might have a chance of taking down the corrupt HOA and exposing their dark secrets once and for all. The stakes had never been higher, but Karen was more determined than ever to see this through. The battle lines had been drawn, and the final showdown with the HOA was about to begin.